A shy young woman visited the gynecologist and discovered that the doctor was a young millionaire. If you're a romance fan, subscribe, like, and tell me where you're watching from. Let's share the love. The waiting room of the clinic smelled faintly of lavender and antiseptic, a combination Amelia Young found oddly comforting. She sat in the corner chair, her fingers clutching the strap of her worn canvas bag, her eyes fixed on the pale blue carpet beneath her feet. Around her, other women flipped through magazines or scrolled through their phones with casual ease, but Amelia felt as though every nerve in her body was exposed. She had postponed this appointment 3 times already. At 26, Amelia knew she should have been more comfortable with routine medical visits, but the truth was that she had never been comfortable with much of anything. Growing up in the quiet town of Aubervilliers, just outside Paris, she had learned early that the world was a place where you could be hurt if you weren't careful. Her mother had died when she was 12, leaving her in the care of a father who loved her but didn't know how to show it. By the time she was 16, Amelia had built walls around herself so high that even she couldn't see over them anymore. Now sitting in this clinic in the heart of Lyon, where she had moved 2 years ago to start fresh, those walls felt paper thin. "Amelia Young?" a nurse called from the doorway. Amelia's heart jumped. She stood quickly, nearly dropping her bag, and followed the nurse down a narrow hallway lined with framed prints of peaceful countryside scenes. The nurse smiled kindly at her, but Amelia couldn't return it. Her throat felt tight. "Dr. Scott will be with you in just a moment," the nurse said, gesturing to an examination room. "You can have a seat on the table. He's wonderful, very gentle and professional. You're in good hands." Amelia nodded mutely and stepped inside. The room was small, but immaculate, with cream-colored walls and a window that overlooked a small courtyard garden. She perched on the edge of the examination table, her hands folded tightly in her lap, and tried to breathe. She hadn't expected a male doctor. The receptionist hadn't mentioned it when she booked the appointment, and now the thought made her stomach twist with fresh anxiety. She considered leaving, just walking out and rescheduling with someone else. But before she could act on the impulse, there was a soft knock at the door. "Miss Young, may I come in?" The voice was warm, professional, with a slight accent she couldn't quite place. French, but refined, educated. Amelia swallowed hard. "Yes," she managed. The door opened, and Dr. William Scott stepped inside. Amelia's first thought was that he didn't look like any doctor she had ever seen. He was young, perhaps in his early 30s, with dark hair that fell just slightly over his forehead and eyes the color of stormy seas. He wore a white coat over a crisp shirt and tie, but there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested he was more accustomed to boardrooms than examination rooms. He was tall, handsome in an understated way, and there was a quiet intensity in his gaze that made Amelia's breath catch. "Good afternoon," he said, offering her a gentle smile as he closed the door behind him. "I'm Dr. Scott. It's nice to meet you." "Hello," Amelia whispered, her voice barely audible. William moved to the small desk in the corner and pulled up her file on the computer. "I see this is your first visit with us," he said conversationally, his tone designed to put her at ease. "Is there anything specific that brought you in today, or is this a routine checkup?" Amelia's cheeks burned. She hated this part, the questions, the explanations, the vulnerability of it all. "Just routine," she said quietly. "It's been a while." "That's perfectly fine," William said, turning to face her. His expression was kind, devoid of judgment. "There's no pressure here. We'll take things at your pace, and if at any point you're uncomfortable, just let me know. My job is to make sure you're healthy and that you feel safe. Does that sound all right?" Amelia nodded, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. There was something about him, something calm and steady, that made her walls lower just a fraction. "Good," William said. "Now, I'll need to ask you a few questions first, and then we'll proceed with the examination. Is that okay?" "Yes," Amelia said softly. Over the next few minutes, William asked her a series of standard medical questions, her history, her symptoms, her concerns. He listened carefully to each answer, never rushing her, never making her feel foolish for her hesitations. When she stumbled over a particularly personal question, he simply waited, his expression patient and understanding. "You're doing great," he said at one point, and the encouragement in his voice was so genuine that Amelia felt something loosen in her chest. When it came time for the examination, William explained every step before he took it, his movements professional and efficient. Amelia kept her eyes fixed on the ceiling, her hands clenched at her sides, but somehow his presence made it bearable. He didn't treat her like a collection of symptoms or an inconvenience. He treated her like a person. "All done," he said finally, stepping back and removing his gloves. "Everything looks perfectly healthy. You can get dressed, and I'll step outside for a moment to give you privacy. When you're ready, we can talk about any questions you might have." Amelia nodded, relief flooding through her. "Thank you," she said quietly. William paused at the door, glancing back at her. "You were very brave today," he said simply. "I know these appointments can be difficult, especially if you're anxious, but you did wonderfully." Before she could respond, he was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind him. Amelia sat there for a moment, her heart still racing, but her body slowly beginning to relax. She couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to her with such kindness, such genuine care. It left her feeling strangely vulnerable, as though a crack had appeared in the armor she had spent so many years building. She dressed quickly and smoothed down her hair, then opened the door to find William waiting in the hallway. He gestured toward a small consultation room nearby. "Please have a seat," he said, holding the door open for her. Amelia sat down in one of the comfortable chairs, and William took the seat across from her, his posture relaxed but attentive. "So," he said, "do you have any questions or concerns? Anything you'd like to discuss?" Amelia shook her head. "No, I think I'm okay." William studied her for a moment, and she had the distinct impression that he saw more than she wanted him to. "You seem very tense," he said gently. "I don't mean to pry, but if there's anything making you uncomfortable, medically or otherwise, I'm here to help." Amelia looked down at her hands. I don't like doctors," she admitted quietly. "I never have." "That's more common than you might think," William said. "May I ask why?" She hesitated, then decided there was no harm in honesty. "When I was a kid, my mother got sick. The doctors kept telling us she'd be fine, that she was getting better, but she wasn't. And then she died, and I guess I've never really trusted them since." William's expression softened with something that looked like genuine sorrow. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was a long time ago," Amelia said, though her voice wavered slightly. "That doesn't make it hurt any less," William said, "and it doesn't mean you have to be over it." The words were so simple, yet they landed in Amelia's chest with unexpected weight. She blinked rapidly, willing herself not to cry in front of this stranger. "For what it's worth," William continued, "I became a doctor because I wanted to do better than the ones who let people down. I know I can't fix everything, and I know I can't change what happened to your mother, but I can promise you that when you're in my care, I'll always be honest with you, and I'll always do my best." Amelia looked up at him, startled by the intensity in his gaze. There was something raw in his words, something that suggested he understood loss in a way that went beyond professional sympathy. "Thank you," she said softly. William smiled, and for the first time, Amelia noticed the way his eyes crinkled at the corners. "You're welcome, and if you ever need anything, medical or otherwise, please don't hesitate to reach out." He handed her a card with the clinic's contact information, and Amelia took it, her fingers brushing his briefly. The touch was electric, unexpected, and she pulled her hand back quickly. "I should go," she said, standing abruptly. "Of course," William said, rising as well. "Take care of yourself, Miss Young." Amelia nodded and hurried out of the room, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with anxiety. As she stepped out into the crisp autumn air of Lyon, she realized she was still clutching his card in her hand. She told herself it didn't mean anything. But deep down, she knew that something had shifted. Amelia had always believed that the universe had a cruel sense of humor. It had been 3 weeks since her appointment with Dr. Scott, and she had done her best to push the memory of him, and the strange, unsettling warmth his kindness had sparked into the back of her mind. She had returned to her quiet life in Lyon, working long hours at the small bookshop where she managed inventory, coming home to her tiny apartment overlooking the Saône River, and spending her evenings reading novels that transported her far from her own unremarkable existence. She was content with this life, or at least she told herself she was. But on a Saturday morning in late October, as she stood in line at her favorite café near Place Bellecour, the universe decided to remind her that contentment was a fragile thing. "Amelia?" The voice was unmistakable, warm, cultured, tinged with surprise. Amelia's heart lurched, and she turned slowly, already knowing who she would see. Dr. William Scott stood behind her in line, dressed casually in a charcoal sweater and dark jeans, a leather messenger bag slung over one shoulder. He looked different without his white coat, more human somehow, though no less imposing. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as though he had been running his fingers through it, and when he smiled at her, Amelia felt her carefully constructed composure begin to crack. "Dr. Scott," she said, her voice coming out higher than she intended. Hello. Please, call me William," he said, stepping closer. "I didn't expect to see you here. Do you come to this café often?" "Every Saturday," Amelia admitted, then immediately regretted it. Why had she told him that? Now he would know where to find her, and the thought was both terrifying and inexplicably thrilling. "Me too," William said with a grin. "Though I usually come earlier before the morning rush, I'm surprised we haven't run into each other before." I'm usually here around 9, Amelia said, glancing at her watch. It was barely past 8. "Ah," William said. "Well, today I slept in, a rare luxury." The barista called for the next customer, and Amelia realized with a start that it was her turn. She stepped forward quickly, grateful for the excuse to break eye contact, and ordered her usual, a café au lait and a pain au chocolat. "I'll have an espresso, please," William said from behind her, "and I'll pay for hers as well." Amelia spun around, her eyes wide. "You don't have to." "I know," William said, handing his card to the barista before Amelia could protest further. "But I'd like to. Consider it a thank you for being such a gracious patient." Amelia's cheeks burned. That's very kind of you, but really you don't." "Too late," William said, his smile widening. "It's done." The barista handed them their receipts, and William gestured toward a small table by the window. "Would you like to sit for a moment? I promise I'm not as intimidating outside the clinic." Amelia hesitated. Every instinct told her to politely decline, to take her coffee and leave before this encounter became anything more than a coincidence. But there was something in William's expression, something open and genuine, that made her pause. "All right," she said quietly, "just for a moment." They settled into the chairs by the window, the morning sunlight streaming through the glass and casting golden patterns across the table. Outside, the streets of Lyon were beginning to wake up, the cafes and shops opening their doors to the weekend crowds. "So," William said, wrapping his hands around his espresso cup, "how have you been? Everything all right since your appointment?" "Yes," Amelia said quickly. "Everything's fine. Thank you." "Good," William said. "I'm glad to hear it." An awkward silence settled between them, and Amelia found herself staring at the foam on her café au lait, as though it held the answers to all of life's mysteries. She wasn't good at small talk, never had been, and the fact that she was sitting across from a man who had seen her at her most vulnerable made it all the more difficult. "You work at a bookshop, don't you?" William said suddenly. Amelia looked up, startled. "How did you—" "It was on your intake form," William said. "I have a good memory for details." "Oh," Amelia said, feeling foolish. "Yes, I do. It's a small place, nothing special." "I think bookshops are very special," William said. "They're like sanctuaries, quiet places where you can escape the noise of the world." Amelia blinked, surprised by the sentiment. "That's exactly how I feel about them." William smiled. "I thought you might. You strike me as someone who values quiet." Is that a polite way of saying I'm boring?" Amelia asked, before she could stop herself. William laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made something flutter in Amelia's chest. "Not at all. I think there's a difference between being quiet and being boring. Quiet people are often the most interesting because they notice things others miss." Amelia didn't know what to say to that, so she took a sip of her coffee instead. William watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read, his espresso forgotten. "Can I ask you something?" he said after a moment. "I suppose," Amelia said cautiously. "Why did you seem so afraid during your appointment?" The question was so direct, so unexpected that Amelia felt her defenses snap into place. "I wasn't afraid," she said quickly. "You were," William said gently. "I could see it, and I don't mean that as a criticism. I'd like to understand." Amelia set her cup down carefully, her hands trembling slightly. "I told you, I don't like doctors." "Because of your mother," William said. "Yes, but it was more than that, wasn't it?" Amelia looked away, her jaw tightening. "I don't know what you mean." William leaned forward slightly, his voice softening. "Amelia, I'm not trying to pry, but I've been a doctor long enough to recognize when someone's carrying more than just medical anxiety. And I think you've been hurt in ways that go deeper than you let on." The words struck something deep inside her, something raw and painful that she had spent years trying to bury. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. "I should go," she said, starting to stand. "Wait," William said, reaching out as though to stop her, though he didn't touch her. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you." "You didn't," Amelia said, though her voice betrayed her. I don't like talking about myself." "I understand," William said. "But if you ever want to talk, I'm here. Not as your doctor, just as someone who'd like to listen." Amelia stared at him, her heart pounding. There was something in his eyes, something sad and knowing, that made her wonder if he too was carrying wounds he didn't speak of. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why do you care?" William was silent for a long moment, his gaze dropping to his espresso. "Because I know what it's like to feel alone," he said finally. "And I don't think anyone should have to feel that way." The honesty in his words left Amelia breathless. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she simply nodded, grabbed her coffee, and fled. As she walked home through the winding streets of Lyon, her mind raced. She didn't know what to make of William Scott, this man who was kind and perceptive and far too observant for her comfort. But one thing was certain. He had seen her in a way no one else had in years, and that terrified her more than anything. Amelia tried to forget about William Scott. She really did. For the next 2 weeks, she threw herself into her work at the bookshop, organizing shelves with meticulous precision, helping customers find the perfect novel, and losing herself in the comforting rhythm of her daily routine. She told herself that their encounter at the cafe had been nothing more than a coincidence, a brief moment that meant nothing and would fade like so many other moments in her unremarkable life. But William had left an imprint on her thoughts that refused to fade. She found herself thinking about him at odd times, while stocking biographies, while walking home along the river, while lying in bed at night staring at the ceiling. She thought about the kindness in his eyes, the way he had listened to her without judgment, the sadness in his voice when he said he knew what it was like to feel alone. And she thought about the card he had given her, which she had tucked into her wallet and looked at more times than she cared to admit. It was on a grey November afternoon, as rain drummed against the bookshop windows, that Amelia's carefully maintained distance finally crumbled. She was alone in the shop. The owner, Madame Fournier, had gone home early with a headache when the bell above the door chimed. Amelia looked up from the register, expecting to see a customer seeking shelter from the rain. Instead, she saw William Scott. He stood in the doorway, raindrops glistening in his dark hair, his coat damp from the storm. In his hands, he held a bouquet of white lilies wrapped in brown paper. "Hello, Amelia," he said quietly. Amelia's heart stopped. "William," she breathed, "what are you doing here?" "I came to apologize," he said, stepping inside and letting the door swing shut behind him. "For the other day, I shouldn't have pushed you to talk about things you weren't ready to discuss. It was unprofessional and insensitive, and I'm sorry." Amelia shook her head, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "You didn't do anything wrong." "I made you uncomfortable," William said. "That's wrong enough." He crossed the shop and set the lilies on the counter between them. "These are for you," he said. "An apology and, well, I suppose I wanted an excuse to see you again." Amelia stared at the flowers, her mind reeling. "I don't understand," she said softly. "Why would you want to see me again?" William smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in it. "Because I can't stop thinking about you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Amelia's breath caught, and she looked up at him, searching his face for any sign that he was joking or playing some cruel game. But all she saw was honesty. "You don't even know me," she said, her voice trembling. "I'd like to," William said, "if you'll let me." Amelia opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the bell above the door chimed again. A customer entered, shaking rain from their umbrella, and the spell was broken. "I should go," William said, glancing at the customer. "But Amelia, think about it, will you? I'm not asking for much, just a chance." He turned and walked toward the door, and Amelia felt panic rise in her chest. "William, wait!" He paused, looking back at her. "Why me?" she asked desperately. You're a doctor. You could have anyone. Why would you care about someone like me?" William's expression softened, and he took a step toward her. "Because you're real," he said simply. "Because you don't pretend to be something you're not. Because when I look at you, I see someone who's been hurt but hasn't let it make her cruel. And because I think we might understand each other in ways most people wouldn't." Before Amelia could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the rain. That evening, as Amelia sat in her apartment with the lilies in a vase on her table, she made a decision. She pulled out her phone and stared at the number on the card William had given her. Her hands shook as she typed out a message, deleted it and typed it again. Finally, she hit send. "Thank you for the flowers. They're beautiful, and I'd like to have coffee with you. If the offer still stands." The response came almost immediately. "It does. Tomorrow? Same cafe, same time?" Amelia smiled despite herself. "Okay, I'm looking forward to it, Amelia." She set her phone down and leaned back in her chair, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She didn't know what she was doing or where this would lead, but for the first time in years, she felt something other than numbness. She felt hope. The next morning, Amelia arrived at the cafe early, her nerves threatening to overwhelm her. She ordered her usual and sat by the window, watching the street and trying to calm her racing thoughts. When William arrived, he was carrying a small bag from a nearby patisserie. He spotted her immediately and broke into a smile that made her stomach flip. "Good morning," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. "I brought croissants. I wasn't sure if you'd already eaten." "I haven't," Amelia said, accepting one gratefully. "Thank you." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and Amelia was surprised to find that it didn't feel awkward. William had a way of making silence feel natural, not strained. "So," he said finally, setting down his espresso, "tell me about yourself. Not the medical history version, the real version." Amelia hesitated, then decided to take the leap. "I'm not very interesting," she said. "I grew up in Aubervilliers. My mother died when I was 12. My father, he did his best, but he didn't really know how to be a parent after that. I moved to Lyon 2 years ago to start over." "And the bookshop?" William asked. "It's the only place I've ever felt like I belonged," Amelia said. "Books don't judge you. They don't ask for anything. They just exist and let you exist alongside them." William nodded thoughtfully. "I can understand that. What about you?" Amelia asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "You said you know what it's like to feel alone. What did you mean?" William's expression grew distant, and for a moment Amelia thought he wouldn't answer. But then he sighed and leaned back in his chair. I grew up in Paris, he said. My family is wealthy, very wealthy. My father owns a pharmaceutical company, Scott Industries. Maybe you've heard of it? Amelia's eyes widened. She had heard of it. Everyone had. Scott Industries was one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in Europe. I had no idea, she said. Most people don't, William said. I don't advertise it. When I decided to become a doctor, my father was furious. He wanted me to take over the company, to follow in his footsteps. But I didn't want that life. I wanted to do something that mattered, something real. So you became a doctor, Amelia said. Yes, William said. But it cost me my relationship with my family. My father hasn't spoken to me in 5 years. My mother tries, but it's complicated. And most people, when they find out who I am, they either want something from me or they can't see past the money. I'm never just William. I'm always William Scott, the heir who walked away. Amelia stared at him, her heart aching for the loneliness in his voice. That sounds unbearable. It is, William said, which is why when I met you I felt relief. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care. You just saw me. I still just see you, Amelia said quietly. William's eyes met hers, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. That's why I can't stop thinking about you, he said, because you make me feel like I can just be myself. Amelia didn't know what to say. The vulnerability in his confession left her speechless, and she realized that William Scott, millionaire, doctor, heir to a fortune, was just as lost and alone as she was. I'm glad you came back, she said finally. William smiled. So am I. And in that moment, sitting in a sunlit cafe in Lyon, Amelia felt something shift inside her. The walls she had built around her heart didn't crumble all at once, but a door had opened. Just a crack, and William Scott was standing on the other side, waiting. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Amelia had ever experienced. William became a constant presence in her life, not overwhelming but steady, like the turning of pages in a beloved book. They met for coffee every Saturday morning, their conversations growing longer and more personal with each encounter. William told her about his work at the clinic, about the patients who broke his heart, and the ones who gave him hope. Amelia told him about the bookshop, about her favorite novels, and the customers who reminded her why she loved her job. They walked along the banks of the Saône on crisp autumn evenings, their breath misting in the cold air as they talked about everything and nothing. William made her laugh with stories from medical school, tales of exhausted residents falling asleep in supply closets and professors with eccentric teaching methods. Amelia surprised herself by opening up about her childhood, about the ache of losing her mother, and the loneliness of growing up in a house where emotions were never discussed. With William, she felt seen in a way she never had before. He didn't try to fix her or tell her that her feelings were wrong. He simply listened, and in his listening, she found a kind of healing she hadn't known was possible. But as December arrived, and the city of Lyon draped itself in Christmas lights, Amelia began to feel the first stirrings of fear. She was falling in love with William Scott, and that terrified her. She had never been in love before, not really. There had been a boy in secondary school who had kissed her once behind the gymnasium, but that had been more curiosity than affection. She had learned early that love was dangerous, that it left you vulnerable to pain and loss. Her mother's death had taught her that. Her father's emotional withdrawal had reinforced it. And now, here was William, kind, brilliant, impossibly wealthy William, making her feel things she had sworn she would never allow herself to feel. It was too much, too fast, too frightening. So Amelia did what she always did when she felt overwhelmed. She pulled away. It started subtly. She began making excuses not to meet for coffee, too much work at the bookshop, a headache, a friend visiting from out of town. A lie, she had no friends to speak of. She responded to William's messages with increasing brevity, her once warm replies dwindling to polite, distant acknowledgements. William, to his credit, didn't push, but she could sense his confusion and hurt in the spaces between his words. "Is everything all right, Amelia? I feel like I've done something wrong." You haven't. I'm just busy. If you need space, I understand. But please know that I'm here if you want to talk. Thank you. The guilt ate at her, but she couldn't bring herself to explain. How could she tell him that she was scared of how much she cared? How could she admit that every time she looked at him, she saw the possibility of heartbreak? It was easier to retreat, to rebuild her walls before they came crashing down on their own. But on a cold Tuesday evening in mid-December, as Amelia was closing up the bookshop, the universe once again refused to let her hide. She was locking the front door when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting to see a late customer, and found herself face to face with William. He looked exhausted, his coat unbuttoned despite the freezing temperature, his expression a mixture of worry and determination. "William," Amelia said, her heart leaping into her throat. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," William said, "and this time I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth." "I don't know what you mean," Amelia said, her voice shaking. "Yes, you do," William said, stepping closer. "You've been avoiding me for 2 weeks, Amelia, and I need to know why. Did I do something, say something? Because if I did, I'll fix it. Just tell me what's wrong." "Nothing's wrong," Amelia insisted, though tears were already pricking at her eyes. I need space." "Why?" William demanded, and there was an edge of desperation in his voice that broke something inside her. "Why are you pushing me away?" "Because I'm scared." The words burst out of her before she could stop them, raw and trembling. "I'm scared, William. I'm scared of how much I care about you, and I'm scared of what will happen when you realize I'm not worth it." William stared at her, his expression stunned. "Not worth it?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Amelia, how could you possibly think that?" "Because it's true," Amelia cried, the tears spilling over now. "Look at me, I'm nobody. I work in a bookshop, I live in a tiny apartment, I have no family, no friends, nothing. And you're William Scott. You're a doctor, you're rich, you're everything I'm not. Why would you want someone like me?" "Because I love you," William shouted, and the words echoed through the empty street. Amelia froze, her breath catching. "What?" "I love you," William said again, quieter this time, but no less fierce. "I'm in love with you, Amelia. And I don't care that you work in a bookshop, or that you live in a small apartment, or that you think you're ordinary. Because to me, you're extraordinary. You're kind and brave and real. And when I'm with you, I feel like I can finally breathe." Amelia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't mean that." "I do," William said, closing the distance between them. "And I think you feel the same way. That's why you're scared. Because you're afraid that if you let yourself love me, you'll lose me, just like you lost your mother." His words hit her like a physical blow, and she felt her knees weaken. "Stop," she whispered. "I won't," William said gently. "Because you need to hear this, Amelia. Loving someone is a risk, I know that. I've spent my whole life avoiding it because I was afraid of being hurt, of being used for my money or my name. But then I met you, and I realized that the risk is worth it. Because a life without love isn't really a life at all." "I don't know how," Amelia sobbed. "I don't know how to let someone in." "Then let me show you," William said, reaching out to take her hands in his. "Let me show you that you're worth loving, that you deserve to be happy. Please, Amelia, don't shut me out." Amelia looked up at him, her vision blurred with tears, and saw nothing but sincerity in his eyes. This man, this wonderful, impossible man, was offering her everything she had ever wanted and never believed she could have. And in that moment, she made a choice. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," William said, his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. "So am I, but we can be scared together." Amelia let out a shaky laugh, and before she could think better of it, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. William held her tightly, his coat damp from the cold, but his embrace warm and steady. "I love you too," she whispered against his chest. "I didn't want to, but I do." William pulled back just enough to look at her, and the joy in his expression was almost too much to bear. "Say it again," he said softly. "I love you," Amelia said, and this time it felt like freedom. William cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gently, reverently, as though she were something precious. And for the first time in her life, Amelia felt like she was home. Winter in Lyon was beautiful that year. Snow fell softly over the city, blanketing the cobblestone streets and the ancient buildings in a layer of pristine white. The Christmas markets opened in Place Bellecour, their wooden stalls filled with handmade ornaments, spiced wine and roasted chestnuts. The air smelled of cinnamon and pine, and everywhere Amelia looked there was light, glowing, golden, hopeful. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was part of it all. William had been right about fear. It didn't disappear overnight. There were still moments when Amelia woke in the middle of the night, her heart racing with the old panic that whispered she wasn't enough, that this happiness was too fragile to last. But William was always there, patient and steady, reminding her with every touch and every word that love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing each other day after day, even when it was hard. They spent Christmas Eve together in William's apartment, a spacious loft in the Presqu'île district that Amelia had initially found intimidating with its modern furnishings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But William had filled it with small touches that made it feel like home. Books scattered on the coffee table, a blanket draped over the sofa, photographs of places he'd travelled pinned to a corkboard in the kitchen. "I'm not much of a cook," William admitted as he pulled a somewhat lopsided quiche from the oven, "but I wanted to make something for us." Amelia laughed, the sound coming easier now than it ever had before. "It looks perfect." They ate dinner by candlelight, talking and laughing until the candles burned low. Afterward, William led her to the window, where they could see the lights of Lyon spread out below them like fallen stars. "I have something for you," William said, reaching into his pocket. Amelia's heart skipped. "William, you didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said, pulling out a small velvet box. Amelia's breath caught. "Is that—" "It's not a ring," William said quickly, a sheepish smile crossing his face. "I mean, not that kind of ring. Not yet. I know we're not ready for that, but I wanted to give you something that means something." He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver ring with a small inscription on the inside. Amelia leaned closer to read it. "You are enough." Tears sprang to her eyes immediately. "William, I know you still struggle with believing it," William said softly, taking the ring from the box and slipping it onto her right hand. "But I want you to have a reminder. You are enough, Amelia. You always have been, and I'll spend every day proving it to you if that's what it takes." Amelia threw her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder as she cried. Not tears of sadness this time, but of overwhelming gratitude. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," she whispered. "You were yourself," William said simply. "That's all you ever needed to be." The new year brought changes, good ones. In January, William introduced Amelia to his colleagues at the clinic. She had been nervous about meeting them, worried they would judge her or wonder what someone like William saw in her. But they welcomed her warmly, treating her not as the girlfriend of the wealthy Dr. Scott, but simply as Amelia, the woman who made their colleagues smile more than he had in years. "He's different since he met you," one of the nurses, Claire, told her over coffee one afternoon. "Lighter somehow, like he's finally allowed himself to be happy." "He makes me happy too," Amelia admitted, surprised by how easy it was to say. In February, William surprised her by coming to the bookshop with an unusual request. "I want to start a reading program at the clinic," he said, his eyes bright with excitement, "for patients who are going through long-term treatment. I've seen how much comfort books bring you, and I thought maybe they could help others too. Would you help me choose the titles?" Amelia felt her heart swell. Of course. They spent weeks curating a collection, novels that offered hope and escape, poetry that spoke to the soul, memoirs that reminded readers they weren't alone. Madame Fournier, the bookshop owner, donated several titles, moved by the project's purpose. When the reading corner opened at the clinic, complete with comfortable chairs and soft lighting, William insisted that Amelia be there for the ribbon cutting. As she watched patients settle into the chairs with books in their hands, their faces relaxing with each turned page, She felt something shift inside her, a sense of purpose she hadn't known she was missing. "Thank you for this," she told William later, as they walked home hand in hand. "Thank you for showing me that medicine isn't just about treating bodies," William said. "It's about healing hearts too. You taught me that." But it was in March that the real test came. William had been quieter than usual for several days, distracted and tense in a way that reminded Amelia of the exhausted doctor she'd met in that examination room months ago. She didn't press him, but she could feel the weight of whatever he was carrying. Finally, one evening as they sat in her apartment, he'd started spending more nights there, preferring its cozy warmth to his own sleek loft. He broke his silence. "My father wants to see me," he said quietly. Amelia set down her book. "Your father? The one who hasn't spoken to you in 5 years?" "Yes," William said, rubbing his face with his hands. "He called yesterday. He said he wants to talk, that it's been too long." "What do you want to do?" Amelia asked carefully. "I don't know," William admitted. "Part of me wants to ignore it, to protect myself from being hurt again. But another part of me wonders if maybe he's changed. If maybe there's a chance to heal that relationship." Amelia reached for his hand. "What does your gut tell you?" William was quiet for a long moment. "That I should go," he said finally. "Not because I think it will be easy, or because I expect him to apologize for everything, but because I need to know if there's any hope left, and because you've taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is be vulnerable." "Then I'll come with you," Amelia said firmly, "if you want me to." William looked at her, surprise and gratitude flooding his face. "You would do that?" "Of course," Amelia said. "You've been there for me through my fears. Let me be there for you through yours." They drove to Paris on a Saturday morning, the city awakening under a pale spring sky. William's father lived in a grand townhouse in the 7th arrondissement, all white stone and wrought iron balconies. Amelia felt her stomach clench as they approached, but William's hand was steady in hers. The housekeeper who answered the door led them to a study lined with books and dark wood paneling. And there, rising from behind a massive desk, was Jean-Pierre Scott, a man in his late 60s with silver hair and William's same storm-grey eyes. "William," he said, his voice formal but not cold. His gaze moved to Amelia, and something flickered in his expression. "And you've brought someone." "This is Amelia Young," William said, his voice steady despite the tension Amelia could feel radiating from him. She's very important to me." Jean-Pierre studied Amelia for a moment, then gestured to the chairs across from his desk. "Please, sit." The conversation that followed was difficult and painful. Jean-Pierre spoke about the years of silence, about his disappointment when William chose medicine over the family business, about his own pride and stubbornness. William listened, his jaw tight, and then spoke his own truth about needing to find his own path, about the loneliness of being valued only for his name and not for himself. Amelia sat quietly, her hand never leaving William's, offering silent support. And then Jean-Pierre did something unexpected. He looked at his son, and his eyes filled with tears. "I was wrong," he said, his voice breaking. "I was so focused on the legacy I wanted you to carry that I forgot to see the man you were becoming. And I'm sorry, William. I'm sorry I made you feel like you weren't enough as you were." The words hung in the air, the same words Amelia had needed to hear, the same wound William carried. William's face crumpled, and in that moment, Amelia saw the little boy he must have been, desperate for his father's approval, aching to be seen. "I just wanted you to be proud of me," he whispered. "I am," Jean-Pierre said, coming around the desk and for the first time in years, embracing his son. "I am so proud of you, of the doctor you've become, of the man you are." Amelia felt tears streaming down her own face as she watched them hold each other, two wounded souls finally finding their way back to each other. And she understood in that moment that healing wasn't always dramatic or sudden. Sometimes it was quiet and painful and took years to unfold, but it was always worth it. On the drive back to Lyon, William was quiet, processing everything that had happened. Amelia didn't try to fill the silence. She simply held his hand, letting him know she was there. Finally, as the lights of Lyon came into view, William spoke. "Thank you," he said, "for being there today, for not running when things got hard, for loving me through all of this." "Thank you for showing me how," Amelia said. "A year ago, I never would have believed I could feel this way, that I could be loved, or that I was strong enough to love someone else. You changed everything for me, William." "We changed each other," William said, bringing her hand to his lips. "And that's the beautiful part, isn't it? That love isn't about one person saving the other. It's about both of us becoming who we were always meant to be." Spring turned to summer, and Lyon bloomed with colour and life. On a warm evening in June, William took Amelia back to the cafe where they'd had their first real conversation. They sat at the same table by the window, the setting sun painting the world in shades of gold. "Do you remember what you asked me that day?" William said, taking both her hands in his. "You asked why I would want someone like you." "I remember," Amelia said softly. "I want to answer that question properly now," William said. "I want you not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Because you're brave enough to face your fears and kind enough to help me face mine. Because when I look at you, I see home. I see a future full of books and laughter and quiet moments and grand adventures. I see everything I've ever wanted, and some things I didn't even know I needed." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, different from the one he'd given her at Christmas, but no less significant. "This time, it is that kind of ring," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "Amelia Young, will you marry me?" Amelia's vision blurred with tears, but her answer was clear and certain. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." William slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple band with a single diamond that caught the light like a promise, and kissed her as the cafe around them erupted in applause from patrons who'd been watching the whole scene unfold. They married in September, in a small ceremony in Lyon, with only their closest friends present. Madame Fournier and the staff from the bookshop were there, along with William's colleagues from the clinic. Even Jean-Pierre attended, walking his son down the aisle with tears in his eyes. But the most meaningful moment came when William and Amelia exchanged their vows. "I promise to remind you every day that you are enough," William said, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to hold your hand through every fear and celebrate every joy. I promise to choose you, today and every day, for the rest of our lives. I promise to be brave with you," Amelia said, her voice thick with emotion. "I promise to let you see all of me, the broken parts and the healing parts and the parts still finding their way. I promise to love you not just in the easy moments, but in the hard ones too. Because you taught me that love isn't about being perfect, it's about being present." Odim, when the officiant pronounced them married and William kissed his wife for the first time, Amelia felt something she'd never felt before: complete and utter peace. Epilogue. 1 year later, the reading corner at William's clinic had expanded into a full program, with volunteers, Amelia among them, coming in weekly to read to patients and help them find books that spoke to their hearts. The bookshop, where Amelia had once felt so alone, had become a gathering place for a community of readers, all drawn together by their shared love of stories. William and Amelia lived in a renovated apartment near the river, its shelves lined with books and its walls covered with photographs of their life together, trips to the countryside, quiet mornings over coffee, moments of laughter and love. And on a crisp October evening, as they walked hand in hand along the same streets where they'd first learned to open their hearts, William turned to his wife with a smile. "Do you remember when you said you were nobody?" he asked. "I do," Amelia said, "and I was wrong." "You were," William agreed, "because you've always been somebody, Amelia. You've always been extraordinary. You just needed someone to help you see it. And you needed someone to remind you that you were more than your name," Amelia said. "I think we were both lost until we found each other." "Not lost," William said, pulling her close. "Just waiting. waiting for the right person to remind us that we were worth finding. And as the lights of Lion glowed around them and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Amelia realized something profound. She had spent so many years believing that her scars made her unworthy of love. But William had taught her the truth, that scars weren't signs of brokenness. They were evidence of survival, of strength, of a heart brave enough to keep beating even when it hurt. Love hadn't saved her. She had saved herself. But love, real, honest, vulnerable love, had given her the courage to try. And that, she thought as William kissed her forehead and they continued their walk home, was the greatest gift of all. True love doesn't fix us. It gives us the courage to fix ourselves. Healing is not about finding someone to save us, but about finding someone who sees our worth even when we can't see it ourselves. The bravest thing we can do is choose to be vulnerable, to let ourselves be seen, and to believe that we are deserving of the very love we're afraid to accept. Sometimes the person who seems to have everything is just as broken as we are, and together we can create something whole.